Jessica Constantinidis. I'm the Field Innovation Officer for ServiceNow in EMEA. So within my job, I basically go into C-level executives. We talk about the challenges they have. We talk about how we can accelerate their P&L, their business processes, and everything around it. Massive amounts of digital transformation, massive amounts of customers going into how do we now make the ecosystem of IT work. So in that ecosystem, there's obviously more than just ServiceNow platforms. So it's about making all of those platforms work together and then servicing the business end to end. So most of the processes they talk about is hire to retire, procure to cash, all of those processes. And I think when coming to ServiceNow, it's actually matching that end-to-end environment, using different platforms underneath, but then streamlining that process, automating and accelerating, and obviously also to a certain extent, evaluating and changing those processes in the future. So most people look at, from an IT perspective, look at tools, they look at platforms, they look at cloud providing and everything like that. But essentially a business runs on just more than IT, right? So when you go into an organization and for instance, you're hiring somebody, it's a really good example. When you hire somebody, IT is responsible for the laptop, maybe the phone, maybe some of the other things. But massive amounts of processes for hiring are not based in IT. And I see that's where the issue sits, right? So they need to understand how can we now bring in the salary? How can we now bring in the skills? How can we now put those people at the right jobs at the right level? When we have people coming in for the hire to retire process, we also see that coming in as an employee, you need to have a grounding, you need to have an entity, you need to have a way to communicate inside your organization. Yes, IT can be the facilitator for that, but you don't necessarily use all the IT resourcing. So when you're, for instance, somewhere in a manufacturing plant, you might not have IT as your first input. You might have the IoT environment as a first input. Or you might need to ask a question somewhere. So how do you get all of that done? And if that person in the manufacturing obviously goes on holiday or they're maybe not there, how do we replace that talent? So there's so much more than just IT. And I think when we see IT struggling, it's them understanding the business. And when a customer makes money, it's about understanding the business and facilitating that as an IT business partner towards the business. That's where we come in. We co-create, we work with IT, we figure out what is the best way to get the business process done on the end level with a view on how can we optimize from an IT perspective, because we're going to have developer shortages, we're going to have skills shortages. How can we make sure that people do the right job at the right time with the right skills at the right level to increase the customer's P&L by using the appropriate tools, communication means, and everything around it. So I think ServiceNow breaches those silos without actually tearing down the silos. We make the platforms talk to each other, and we actually understand from a business perspective, a small change in the business might mean a big change in increase of P&L. So there, I think we're different to other cloud platforms. We touch the business far more than the other ones. But don't get me wrong, we work with a lot of the IT platforms as well. So it's that transcendence kind of, we call it the digital brain for the organization, where we bring all the data together, we bring all of the processes together, and then make a conscious business decision. So when you talk cloud, there's multiple levels, right? There's private cloud, there's public cloud, there's SaaS environments, and all sorts of stuff. And I think a lot of the customers, what we see now is a lot of sovereignty popping up, a lot of private environments popping up. We don't distinguish between clouds. We work with all the clouds out there. We have pre-integrations with clouds out there, and we're ourselves a cloud platform. So you can have ServiceNow in an on-prem environment, you can have ServiceNow in a SaaS environment. We don't distinguish. It comes down to the flavor of the customer, the compliancy they need, and how they need to fit it in. What we do see on the customer side is they're asking the question from an IT perspective, is that right cloud platform being used? Is there, like for instance, shadow IT? Should we figure out different costs? How do we take those costs down? That's where ServiceNow comes in, and we calculate, we modify, and we verify where everything sits. So yes, we are a cloud platform, but yes, we can also do local. And I think when we have that flexibility between moving each and every one of those areas, there's not a discussion anymore about should we do cloud or should we not. I think it's about understanding the data, the sovereignty, the goal you're using, and why you're using it. Even if the data does not sit in a SaaS can still make a decision based upon data on-prem. And that's where a lot of the customers don't actually understand the difference between data, cloud, and the sovereignty around it. So when we go in, for us, it's one data model, one platform, and basically one element of talking together and understanding processes, right? So when you go in there, I think when you look at those platforms and when you look at what customers are asking for, is the integration and the onboarding of certain technologies like AI operations, RPA, and all of those things. Obviously, that's what customers have been asking us over the years, right? Now, do they have their own AI? They can have their own AI. Do they have their own RPA? They can have their own RPA. What we facilitate is a basic, let's just say, baseline of what they could potentially use. Now, if you want to use AI to develop cancer cells, you're not going to use it on ServiceNow, right? We're using applied AI on the platform to figure all that out. So every single, I would say, acquisition or merger or partnership we do with the intent to serve our customers. So we listen to customers, we listen at what they need, where they need to go into. So a lot of low-code, no-code is coming in there. Software 2.0, we're looking at that. So how can a platform develop for you with the shortage of the developers? We're looking at all sorts of technologies, like for instance, the latest acquisition we've done is Hitchworks. Hitchworks is AI skills mapping. Again, because customers were asking us, we have this single platform, this single environment. How do we now find the right people to work with us? So we listen to them, and we base most of our acquisitions, and I can't disclose the future ones, of course, but most of our acquisitions are based upon customer demand. So for me, data is the new oil, right? Every decision we make in the future, whether it's hyper-automated, whether it's fully normally automated, whether we go into AI or machine learning, is a data-based decision, right? So you first got to understand what kind of data are you using. And if you're using it in perpetual platforms, and those platforms do not talk to each other, then you have an issue, right? So if you have an SAP system that doesn't talk to a Workday system, for instance, and you need to make a business decision based upon those two, you have an issue. So therefore, you will have to have extra tools in there to make that bridge. What we try to do with ServiceNow is bridge those immediately and understand, like, what do we now do with the data sitting in those platforms, pulling it out and making those business decisions. So there's a lot of stuff out there that, yes, you can have separate, yes, you can have siloed. But when we go into the future, there's one single word that comes out, which is cognitive, predictive. Cognitive and predictive, per definition, is shared data environments. It doesn't necessarily mean, same as with the cloud, it doesn't mean that you have to have shared data everywhere. But the basic data decision needs to be shared with another platform. So sharing the data as in intellectual property, you might not want to do that. But sharing the data as in business decisions and business resolutions, that's an absolute key.